Look, I think to understand what's happened in the last couple of years, one has to look back a little bit further. The last about 5 or 6 years has been, barring the last two, has been terrible for the real estate sector. Right. So during this period, we saw sales were very slow. We saw prices almost across the country were either flat or negative, and all of this has led to an increased affordability for the customer. So if you look back in over 5 years, I think you'll see increases in salaries. If you take even a 12% compounded increase in salaries, you'll talk about almost a 70% increase in salaries, right? Our interest rates today are the same where they were about 5 years ago. So which means there's about a 70% increase in the affordability of home buyers, right? Over this period, people therefore, because prices stayed flat, those who went in and bought about 2 years ago made the smartest decision, right? Because lowest prices, highest affordability, best time to buy. The outcome of that we've also seen is that prices have started moving up. And the other big change that's also happened is because people can afford more, they've ended up buying larger homes. Now, whenever a person buys a home, once they decide their location, right, what we have found is that they try and maximize what they can afford, maximize their home loan, and therefore buy the largest home that they can in that location. Right? And as a result, because the affordability has been up, we've seen the trend shifting to much larger homes. Now, this has also been accelerated because of what people experience in smaller sized homes because of COVID. So based on all our research we have seen and our experience, we've seen that customers are wanting much larger homes today. And in fact, in Pune, if you look at it, when the market was the tightest, the average size of homes being launched was about 795 square feet. This has gone to above 1100 square feet being launched now. So there's such a big gap in terms of almost a 50% increase in the size of homes being launched. So this has really been a big change that we've seen in the market today. As a result, I think developers have responded, launches have gone up, supply has gone up, demand continues to be robust. So this is the current situation. As we look forward, I think this continues, right? I think we're in a strong economy, right? Job growth for the people who are buying homes continues. Businesses are doing very well. So I think as a result of all of this, we'll continue to see the real estate market do well. However, the joker in the pack really is, I think, what happens to job security for people who are buying homes, right? Now, if you think about it, and there's lots of talk now about a number of companies who've been doing layoffs. So if there is job security, the housing market continues to boom. If you are insecure about your job, forget about buying a home, you're not buying a TV, right? So job security is the single biggest yes-no decision maker. And as long as, the advent of AI, the shifts in the job market don't end up causing people generally to be insecure. If I feel that my job is secure and yours is not, I'll still buy a home, right? So really, I think the only joker in the pack is job security. Everything else is looking very strong right now for the market. See, as a developer, right, if I function based on what I would like to do or purely my profit margin and the customer is in a different place, I'm dead in the water, right? So developers have to respond to the consumer demands. So that is 100% and that needs to be the only driver. Now people have an affordability for larger homes. Just to let you know, the moment you go from a 2-bedroom apartment of 1100 square feet to a 2-bedroom apartment of 1200 square feet, your actual cost per square foot comes down by a little bit. Because look, what are the expensive things in an apartment? The bathroom is expensive to build. In a 2-bedroom, you still have 2 bathrooms, right? You have a kitchen which is expensive. You still have 1 kitchen. You put an expensive main door, you still have 1 main door, right? It's just that the room sizes are increasing in a 2-bedroom. So in fact, the cost of construction marginally goes down and the increase in raw material costs get covered A through that, and B, today the increase in raw material costs are getting covered based on the increase in our selling prices. So today, because it is a strong market, because there is a demand from consumers, because consumers can afford to pay a little bit more, the developers are able to pass on our cost increases to the end customer. So this is protecting the bottom line and the profitability of developers. It's not that because prices are rising, that developers' profits are going up proportionately. Part of it is going into the increase in the raw material costs. So I think there is a risk of oversupply, right? As long as the demand and supply is in sync, you're okay, right? The thing with luxury real estate is this: it's very sexy. For a developer, see, a developer won't talk about to friends and at a party to say, you know what, I'm doing 2,000 homes, but they are of 5 and 800 square feet. You want to talk about the apartment, which is 5,000 square feet, 10,000 square feet, best views, I have a pool on the terrace. This is the sexy stuff to talk about, right? So there is a lure to that. The prices of those are higher, but luxury is by far the most volatile. If you look at the last 5 years, in our own case as a company, right, we had projects which were catering to the mass audience. We also had one luxury development, right? In 7 years, we didn't sell a single apartment. I was sitting on ready inventory worth hundreds of crores, didn't sell. At the same time, we were able to sell thousands of apartments which were in the 1,000 square foot sizing. Okay, so luxury, while it is attractive, when the market turns gets hit the maximum. Now, if we oversupply as an industry, as developers, if we oversupply into that space and the market turns, we will be stuck with inventory and being unable to sell it again. Real estate is, like you said, projects take 5 years, take 6 years, 4 years, whatever, right? So these are long cycle projects. And during these long cycles, you have economic cycles as well. Now, that will happen. We will go through a boom and it will be followed by a bust cycle. The nature of the industry is such, the nature of economies are such that you have boom and bust cycles. The question is, how geared up is that real estate developer to last that bust cycle? And ultimately, that's this game, right? If you're in the industry for a long term, you have to have the resilience to be able to last the down cycle. So, what I think has happened is, if you look at 2008, when the first IPO boom for real estate happened, the whole story for every developer was one thing: Pan India. So Pan India isn't something new, right? Then everybody realized that Pan India doesn't work. So everybody started focusing on their geographies. With with demonetization and with the ILFS and all of the other issues that the industry has faced, what we've started seeing is that there's been a consolidation. A lot of the small fly-by-night operators are no longer playing in the industry, right? So there has been an increase in the large organized players. Now, if you have to compete, let's say if you're competing as an established player in a market, right, like we do in our markets, right, then if any other established player also comes in, you have to compete head to head, right? What that means is the market share is being taken away from the smaller, lesser organized players. Because consumers today are also much more discerning than they ever were before. RERA has also driven this, that consumers are more discerning today than they were before. As a result, there is a greater market share going to the organized players, and this is continuing to lead to the consolidation within the industry. And this is the maturing of any industry. I think in India, in our cities, we have the highest per capita number of developers of any country in the world, probably, right? But how is this tenable? There is no barrier to entry to become a developer. Now the barriers are coming in. Right? Previously, you could do a JD with somebody. JD is 10% of the land value, right? You start your paperwork and documentation with 10% of your deposit. So with 1% of land value, you do 100 crore wala project by paying 1 crore, right? I mean, how is that even tenable? Now that is changing. And therefore, fly-by-nights are going out of the industry, and that share is being taken over by the large players. Now, whether they're local in that geography or whether we are spreading to other cities, it leads to competition, it leads to an improvement in the product as far as the customer is concerned, and it leads to an overall upliftment of the industry. I think it's very good. So I think the laws that have already been brought in by this government are fantastic, right? A lot of people were apprehensive about RERA, but look at the change that is brought about. Having said that, before RERA in Maharashtra, we had something called MOFA, 1966. If you read the preamble of MOFA, it said it was created to protect the home buyer. RERA came in, created to protect the home buyer. The big difference is this time it got implemented, right? So what we are seeing is these new laws Bankruptcy code could have happened before, but this time it's been implemented, right? So the intent behind the law is now actually being driven through the industry. So I think that's a very good thing. I also think that that the government is being responsive. Now, the government is not in business and therefore cannot understand the nuances when they create the law. But as long as they are responsive like they are, certain things may happen a little bit slowly, but the changes are taking place. And I think even with the recent changes, there'll still need to be improvement, there'll still need to be fine tuning. But I think the most important thing is previously, you never thought that once you start a project, no builder ever thought that he could lose his project, right? And along with the project, you could lose your equity. It was unheard of for us in this industry. Today, it's a reality. You can lose, and in fact, in our case, it goes even further. Not only do you lose your project, you lose your equity, you also lose your freedom by going to jail, right? So this is a change which no other economy actually has the risk of jail and judicial intervention, right? In case you're going haywire in a project. So all these things I think are very good for the banks. They're good for the customers. They're also good for the developers because all of us then have to think much harder about the project that we're doing. You don't follow herd mentality. So I think what's happening in terms of the cleanup in this industry is absolutely fantastic. Look, if you take GST, for example, an input tax credit, we had it before. Okay. The customer who was buying the home from us felt that the cost is too high on taxes. So the government said we'll lower the tax and not give you input set off. Net, cost to customer is the same. The hit to the builder is more, right? But eventually the cost that the customer is paying is the same. Okay. I think the biggest place where the government needs to look at policy change, right, is on job creation. And job creation even within our sector. Because look, with the advent of AI, robotic process automation, all of these technologies which are coming in, we all developers will see growth, right? But as we see growth in our operations, our site staff will increase, the labor will increase. But even there's mechanization coming in, right? But the people in the office, we are thinking currently, how do we increase our scale 2x with no increase in manpower? Okay. So the government needs to be thinking and saying, okay, how do we make, if we want to create jobs, it shouldn't be 2x. How do we get developers to grow 3x and 4x? This is where the government needs to be doing the larger, higher level thinking, right? Input tax, you get it, you don't get it. They'll define the definition of affordable housing. As long as you focus on people's affordability, right? You keep interest rates affordable, you give them job security, the sector is doing fine. Can there be little tweaks to always improve things for us? Always, right? There can be improvements on how you get from your office to come here for this conference today. That's always possible. But I think if the government needs to look at something at the much larger level, right, is how do we get the industry to actually increase in its size where we can continue to employ more people in the industry from India's employment perspective. I think that's the big challenge for the government today.